No, I think about him every day. He in his 20s, he had the drug problems, and just, I mean, God, I put him in rehab so many times, and every time he'd be doing great, and then it would just fall back. I mean, you've heard the same story from a million people.
Nothing prepared the Harrison family for the tragedy that unfolded in their lives. Adam Harrison, the son of Rick Harrison, who had largely remained out of the public eye, passed away unexpectedly, leaving family and friends in shock. While viewers knew the family through Pawn Stars, few were aware of the personal battles Adam faced off-camera. What really happened to Adam behind closed doors? And what did investigators uncover about his death that shocked everyone? Join us as we unravel the story behind the late Adam Harrison and what was discovered after his death. The shocking discovery. On January 19, 2024, the Harrison family received devastating news. Adam Harrison, the son of Rick Harrison, had been found unresponsive in a guest house in the Las Vegas area. At the time he was discovered, emergency responders were called, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. This tragedy happened when Adam was just 39 years old. However, there was a shocking part. For someone whose family lived round the spotlight, Adam's situation did not unfold in public. Adam was not part of the day-to-day operations of the gold and silver pawn shop, and he was not a regular figure on Pawn Stars. His life had remained largely separate from the business and the television spotlight. Because of that, the news came as a shock to viewers who knew the Harrison family but knew very little about him. A few days later, authorities confirmed the cause of death. According to the official report, Adam died from a combination of fentanyl and methamphetamine. The classification was an accidental overdose of deadly drugs. The findings provided a clear answer about what happened, but they also pointed to a pattern that had been building over time. Rick Harrison also addressed his son's death publicly not long after. In his statement, he confirmed the role fentanyl played and spoke about the impact it had on Adam's life. Rick explained that the drug had changed his son's behavior and led to a series of poor decisions, including time spent in jail. Those close to the family understood that Adam's struggles had not started suddenly. There had been obvious signs, even right from the beginning. There were periods where he distanced himself and moments where communication became less consistent. While these details were not widely known to the public, they were part of the reality the family had been dealing with privately. The location where Adam was found also reflected how separate his life had become. Unlike his brothers and every other member of the family, he was not surrounded by family or working at the shop. He was always on his own. That distance had been growing for years, even as the rest of the Harrison family remained closely tied to the business and to each other. For many people hearing the news, the lack of public visibility made it feel sudden. To the outside world, he had largely disappeared from public view. For fans of Pawn Stars, especially those hearing about him for the first time, the situation was almost confusing. Questions arose about where he had been all these while, and that made the news of his death struck like lightning. Although unknown, yet intimately connected to a family so familiar to millions, Adam's life had ended abruptly. However, it brought together a series of events that had been unfolding over time to the family who knew about it and had tried possible ways to make him survive. What happened on that day was not isolated from everything that came before it. Now that the circumstances of his death were known, attention turned to the years leading up to it. How his path had slowly moved away from the structure of the pawn shop, and what had been happening in his life long before that final day. What were the struggles Adam faced behind the scenes? The early life of Adam Harrison. Before Pawn Stars brought national attention to the Harrison family, Adam Harrison had already spent time around the gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas. As a teenager, he worked there briefly, learning the basics of the business and watching how deals were handled. Adam had access to the same environment that made his family famous. The pawn shop exposed him to a flow of people and valuable items. This offered him a practical education that went beyond classrooms. However, while others in the family leaned into that world, Adam gradually took a different direction. He was not known for actively pursuing a long-term role in the business, and as he grew older, his life began to move further away from the structure that defined his family's public identity. By the time the show began to grow, he was no longer involved in the business. He had no interest in being on camera and kept his distance from the attention that followed his father, Rick Harrison. Instead, Adam focused on regular work. He spent time working as a plumber, carpenter, mechanical fixes, and several other hands-on jobs. His routine was built around practical work rather than the fast-paced environment of the pawn shop. While his brother Corey Harrison became a familiar face to viewers, Adam stayed out of that space entirely. Corey, known for his sharp negotiating skills and personable presence, became a central figure in the show, interacting regularly with customers and the camera crew. Corey embraced the public attention, building a reputation not only as a businessman, but also as a recognizable personality. In contrast, Adam avoided that exposure, focusing on personal interests and off-screen work. Their different approaches to life highlighted a clear contrast. Corey thrived in the family's public world, while Adam maintained a distant path. Outside of work, Adam had a small circle of long-term friends who described him as loyal and easygoing. He enjoyed spending time in low-key settings, from backyard gatherings to neighborhood barbecues and small group dinners. To him, that was the fun part of life. Music was another constant in Adam's life. He played the guitar, often spending evenings alone in his guest house or with close friends, strumming familiar blues and classic rock songs. These sessions were not performances, but a way to process emotions and enjoy moments of calm. However, over time, his lifestyle began to change. He started keeping a different circle and became less consistent in how often he showed up around family. The shift was gradual, but it was noticeable to everyone who was closer to him. What began as occasional drug use did not remain occasional. It became more frequent and started to affect his life and his decisions. His father, Rick, also confirmed that these changes led to serious consequences. Adam had encounters with law enforcement and spent time in jail, which Rick directly connected to the influence of drugs in his life. Adam was arrested for possession of controlled substances, which led to a short period in jail. He was placed on probation and released thereafter. However, even after he was released and returned home, he continued to battle with temptation. His relapses were part of a repeating cycle that took a heavy toll on his health and relationships. There were also periods where things seemed to improve. He would reconnect, show signs of getting back on track, and reappear around the family. But those moments didn't always hold. The same patterns would return, pulling him away again. This back and forth became part of his adult life, stretching across several years. Despite everything, Adam remained separate from the structure that defined the rest of the family. He was not involved in the shop, and he did not share in the routine that kept others grounded. His path had fully shifted away from that world. By the time Pawn Stars reached its peak, Adam was already living outside of it. He was already working his own jobs, moving through his own challenges, and dealing with struggles that were largely unseen by the public. No father should ever have to bury his own son. The grief from Rick stays with him forever. Now that he has gotten the courage to speak up about his son's death, what does he have to say? Rick Harrison speaks out. After the loss of his son, Rick Harrison did not retreat entirely into silence. In the first weeks, he grieved privately with his family, but as condolences poured in, he made choices about what to share and when. Rick has spent decades in the public eye because of Pawn Stars, but this was not a moment for performance. Within days of the news breaking in January 2024, Rick posted a tribute to Adam on social media. The message was straightforward and heartfelt. Alongside a photo of his son, he wrote that Adam would always be in my heart. Even as he spoke publicly, he asked for privacy for the family. making it clear where the line between public communication and personal mourning lay. In the weeks that followed, Rick granted a small number of interviews. He did not seek out press attention, but when asked, he spoke directly and without pretense. His focus was on remembering his son, not on offering answers or shaping a narrative. He described the experience of grief not as a moment that passes, but as something that enters ordinary life, something you carry with you. He said that thoughts of Adam were a part of every day, even in the simple routines of morning coffee or quiet evenings at home. Rick also spoke about the challenge of watching someone you love struggle. He did not pretend to have reasons or explanations that could suddenly make sense of what had happened. Instead, he talked about the limits of his role as a father, how love is not always enough to change someone's path. In these moments, his words reflected the tension between a parent's instinct to protect and the reality of a life lived outside the family's direct influence. For Rick, who was already dealing with some professional challenges and legal pressures, the death of his son added another layer of difficulty to an already overwhelming situation. In addition, financial burdens increased. The pawn shop faced management challenges and reportedly ran at a loss. Beyond legal fees, insurance, and payroll, the shop had to invest in security upgrades and technology to protect high-value inventory. Some involved former employees claimed wrongful termination or workplace issues. Others centered on business deals that had gone sour. Rick had it worse. As the conversation continued, Rick addressed the role drugs had played in Adam's life. He was clear in his statements. The presence of fentanyl and methamphetamine had contributed directly to his son's death. He also used his platform to speak more broadly about addiction. Rather than isolating the situation, Rick acknowledged that many families face similar battles, often without visibility or support. Rick emphasized that the prevalence of the deadly drug is becoming an increasingly pressing problem that cannot be ignored, asserting, "We must do better." Throughout all of this, Rick remained consistent in one message. His grief was ongoing, and his love for Adam was unwavering. In interviews and posts, he made no attempt to minimize the pain of losing a child. In speaking openly about his son, Rick allowed others to see the human side of a moment that was otherwise deeply private. And in doing so, he honored Adam on his own terms. Now that Rick has spoken about the death of his son and the grief he had to put up with, how did the world react to, and what was the experience of the general public about substance abuse? The public's reaction. The news of Adam Harrison's death spread rapidly. It drew a response that went far beyond routine celebrity coverage. Viewers of Pawn Stars reacted with a mix of shock and unexpectedness, considering that the Harrisons had recently just lost another family member. The death of Adam was the final blow to them. As if that wasn't enough, many expressed surprise that a member of the Harrison family, who had lived almost entirely outside the show's visibility, was now viral for his death. Within hours, social media platforms were filled with condolences directed at Rick Harrison and his family. Public reaction also included calls for practical measures. Some users encouraged wider availability of naloxone, an opioid antagonist used to reverse overdoses, and shared information on where it can be obtained. Others pointed to the need for earlier intervention, including screening, counseling, and community-based support. Institutions have also consistently reinforced these concerns. Agencies such as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report that synthetic opioids, particularly fentanyl, account for a significant proportion of overdose deaths in the United States. In 2023, drug overdose fatalities topped 112,000 for the first time in U.S. history. This surpassed the devastation wrought by the crack cocaine crisis in the 1980s and the opioid epidemic of the early 2000s. That was not all. The United States further made awareness after Adam's death. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration continues to expand access to treatment services to individuals facing substance abuse and mental health challenges. This includes medication-assisted treatment and crisis support lines. These services aim to reduce barriers to care and offer immediate assistance during critical moments. The response from the public continued. In the days following Adam Harrison's death, social media feeds were filled with personal stories from fans who had experienced similar losses in their own families, many sharing memories of loved ones who had struggled with addiction. The reaction wasn't limited to the United States. Fans from Europe, South America, and Asia shared messages of mourning and solidarity, often recalling how Pawn Stars had been part of their daily routines. Now that the world has shared their experiences, coupled with the intervention of drug use personnel, how does this affect the family and the continuing of Pawn Stars at large? The aftermath of his death. When the news of Adam Harrison's death reached the public, reactions poured in from around the world. People expressed shock, sorrow, and support for the Harrison family. But inside the gold and silver pawn shop, the response was measured by everyday details rather than headlines. The shop remained open, customers still walked in to initiate exchanges, and the business continued. Also, Pawn Stars still aired, but longtime staff noticed a change in tone. Conversations that had once revolved around deals and fines were now quieter, more careful. When someone mentioned family, the energy that usually filled the shop felt subdued. Employees who had known Adam Harrison since he was young remembered him as easygoing and observant. He wasn't loud or attention-seeking, but he had a way of making people feel comfortable. One staff member recalled how Adam would sit in the break room and listen more than he talked, nodding along and offering a joke only when it fit perfectly. For those who had watched him grow up, his death was the loss of someone they had seen change from a boy into a man. Within the Harrison family, the loss was deeply tangible. Rick Harrison spoke openly about the emptiness that came with losing a child, describing routines that had suddenly taken on new weight. He said there were mornings when he reached for his phone to call Adam, only to realize the call would never happen. At meals, his seat remained empty, a reminder of the absence that now marked everyday life. Adam's siblings felt similar jolts of absence. Corey Harrison and the others shared memories of childhood moments. They would always go on summer road trips, family dinners, and inside jokes that only siblings could appreciate. These were not stories made for the fragments of life they had lived together. Sometimes these memories brought laughter. Other times, they brought a sudden stillness as the room remembered who was missing. Friends who stayed in touch with Adam after he left the pawn shop also shared their own recollections. They remembered him as dependable in his own way. People also shared their own experiences of loss and struggle, writing about relatives who had faced similar battles. Yet even as these conversations unfolded, certain questions remain impossible to answer fully. What might have changed if Adam's struggles had been different? These uncertainties linger alongside the grief, shaping the Harrison family's experience in ways that are ongoing rather than finite. Of course, Pawn Stars continued to move forward. However, even as Pawn Stars moves forward, the bigger question is whether it can truly feel the same as before. The show has always depended on the chemistry between personalities like Rick Harrison, the late Richard Harrison, and Corey Harrison, whose interactions gave it authenticity beyond the deals themselves. Now that everyone that made the series better is dealing with deaths of loved ones, people wonder how they will keep up. Ultimately, the aftermath of Adam Harrison's passing underscores the fragile line between public perception and private reality. While fans may remember him as a quiet presence on the show, his life and death reveal a complex story of familial bonds, personal struggles, and societal challenges. The incident changed the emotional landscape of the Harrison family and affected the environment of the Pawn Stars business. It also reinforces the opinion that behind every familiar face is a deeper, often unseen human story. Do you think the Harrison family, especially Rick and Pawn Stars, will be able to continue as before after this tragedy? Could Adam Harrison's story have been different if the struggles behind closed doors were better handled? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.